Good morning, friends. Let's pray together. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, friend, beloved God, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Sri Yukteswar, our beloved Gurudeva, Paramahansa Yogananda, saints of all religions, our dear friend, our guide, beloved Swamiji. We humbly bow before you all. Great Masters, be with us always, helping us to drop all delusion of separateness. Help us even when that is the most difficult to do, when our attachments are the greatest. Help us to remember that you are the source of all security, of all abundance. And by remembering that, help us to deepen our relationship with thee. Om. Peace. Amen. I moved into the Ananda community here in Palo Alto in the year 2000. And as I've told many of you, I am also a physician, but I was coming back from the East Coast and I actually wasn't working. And I then went through this period of almost a full year where it was difficult for me to get back to work, just because of the politics of it. I loved medicine. I wanted to be in medicine. In fact, I used to tease the many people at the California Medical Association. Many of them were my patients, and yet they couldn't help me get my license reinstated. So it was just a little hiccup that was there for my benefit, but it left me in an odd relationship to money for a while. I was a physician, and I had booming practices, both in California, then on the East Coast where I had just lived for 5 years. So money really should not have been an issue. Again, it was a divine Leela. As always with these important things, we see them much more clearly, unfortunately, with hindsight, but that's okay. I feel grateful that I got the message. But sometime soon after that, wasn't quite a struggle, but it was a little bit of a feisty, ongoing interaction with God. Excuse me for 1 minute. David and Asha appeared in my apartment one night to talk to me, and what they asked of me was that I become the fundraiser for this very large project of trying to build our school. I was so taken aback by it. This is true. I'm not saying this to be funny at all. I literally looked at them early on in the conversation, and I said to them, "Are you in the right apartment?" I mean, for a moment, I actually believed that they had knocked on the wrong door, come in, were sitting down and having this conversation with me about becoming the head of fundraising here in Palo Alto, and forgot that they were talking to me. It was something so not in my consciousness. I always had an interesting relationship to money. we did not have money when I was growing up, but somehow I wasn't troubled by that. That is very odd. That is clearly a karmic, something that I've pulled from other lifetimes, because that's hard for most children. But it never really bothered me all that much. Then I had this opportunity as an adult to begin to make money, because I was a physician and my practices were successful. But somehow in my life, every time or all the time that I was making a good amount of money, somebody who I knew and loved needed it more than I did. And so I did not have these words. I didn't have these thoughts, and I certainly didn't have the consciousness around money that I now have. But somehow I knew I was much more of a channel for money than I was the depository. It didn't stay with me, not because I was frivolous. I wasn't. But anyway, my whole story is not all that important, but that whole relationship to money matters in terms of what unfolded. I asked them if they were...
Can we pause you for just 1 second? Sorry. Okay.
I was just asked to pause, so I'm not sure how much of what I just said you heard.
They heard almost exactly everything.
Okay, perfect. I'm being told that you've heard it all. So my relationship with money was not the same then, nor is it important, but it was an easy relationship. Still, I said to David and Asha, you're in the right apartment, right? And they said, yeah. I said, I know nothing about fundraising. I'm not even that mindful about money, if you will. I always had the ability to make money, but I didn't care about it as much as most people around me did. And I remember they looked at me and they said to me, we know exactly where we are, no surprise. Yes, we want you to do this. Whatever else is your relationship to money, you have good money magnetism. I had never heard that phrase before. But I'm telling you all of that not because I actually want to talk about money magnetism. I don't. But what happened for me very quickly after that, and then until recently almost, in my relationship to money and a spiritual path, because I've stayed very much a part of all of our fundraising efforts here, is that I very quickly came to understand that as long as I wasn't asking for money, or to really see it, people used to say to me, don't you have trouble asking for money? But I never did, because I certainly was not asking for anything for myself. I was asking for a greater cause. In fact, the greatest good. I was asking in a way that had to do with inviting people to open to that flow of energy, which is really what money is. And long before I had any words for that, long before even my own consciousness had expanded fully into that knowing, there was a place in me that really got that it was when we invite people to give money to any cause, we are really offering them, and ourselves, of course. I mean, I'm one of them in this case, but we're being offered the opportunity to open up, to invite God into our lives, to acknowledge God as the source of all abundance and to build a deeper relationship with Him in many ways. And again, even before the words were there, as soon as I came out of shock and put myself to the task of learning about fundraising, I began to realize that I did not have a conscious relationship to money. I had just been unconscious about it. That turned out not to be a horrible thing in my life, with a lot of God's grace. But then I began to become more conscious about what money really is to those of us on a spiritual path, those of us who are seeking to dissolve all delusion of separateness from God, and that money and the ability to have money flow through us was a great tool for dissolving delusion. I also came to understand that short of telling people that they are making a mistake in something that they're doing while raising their children, hardest thing in the world to even consider doing, that for many people, talking about money is very difficult. I know that Master has said the three greatest delusions are sex, drugs, and money. And I have come to really experience his wisdom in all three of those areas. But I soon began to find out how hard it was for many people, and I totally understand this because we are taught from very early on that if we have money, we have security, and that by collecting more money, we're collecting more security. And that is a huge part of this human condition, and precisely why Master would have said what he said about what a great delusion it is, because we're just taught it in such a strong way, how to make money, make more money, save money. Money is ours. If we give any of it away, we're being just simply kind. The least little bit that we give feels huge to us until we become more conscious of it. Until we begin to know, which is one of the great gifts of this spiritual path, when we begin to learn and to see. And I want to talk a little bit about tithing, which is why I'm talking about money. I've spoken a little bit about money magnetism and the source of abundance being completely in the divine, and all of our security, actually coming to realize that all of our security rests in God, not in that bank account. And that in fact, like all other bank accounts, all of our other securities, savings, come from God, so also does money. Now I'd like to address the topic of tithing a little bit, because it's different actually than fundraising or than giving money at one time as a donation or pledging money for one particular purpose, like we're trying to build our school, I'll give $50 a month towards that. That is very different than the whole notion of tithing, which is in fact biblical. Tithing is not an Ananda thing. It is not a 2020 thing. Moses actually went to the Jews when they were making their exodus out of Egypt and back towards Palestine at a time where they had nothing, where they were coming out of slavery. And he said to them, the first 10% of everything we grow, of everything we acquire, we'll give back to God. He didn't say to them, as soon as we sort of have enough in savings, as soon as we know that we're secure on a material basis, we'll start giving back to God. He said, right now, right away, we will give 10%. In those days, it was of everything we grow back to God. Why did he say that to them? For the same reason that we talk about tithing in the year 2020. He said that to them because he wanted his people to begin to remember that God is the source of everything, that all of our security rests in God, and that whatever we have, if we give that first 10% back, we are reminding ourselves of that constantly. This is, everything is yours, God, everything. The more we offer it back in a meaningful way, the more we make our tithing a conscious act of giving back to God, then we begin to spiritualize our relationship even to money. Then we begin to find the next way of reminding ourselves that it was God's, it is God's. We would have nothing if it wasn't for God. And that simple act of making a regular tithe. Now, tithe actually it actually means a tenth. It means that. But of course, we all know, that if we had to sit, most of us, or many of us, let me say that, and decide to offer 10% of everything that comes to us back to God in a monetary way, in any way, that would be a challenge. Maybe too hard of a challenge for most of us. And because, like everything on the spiritual path, our movement back to that smriti, to that remembering that we, in fact, are manifestations of God, that everything is a manifestation of the divine, it's got to be directional. If it's not directional, then we've all failed. Maybe 10% is too much. Maybe we sit and we say to ourselves, what can we do to remember to open our heart, to open to that flow of energy as we're giving back to the source of all that is? Because what we're really doing when we do that is we are inviting God back in. We're opening as a channel, as a way for energy to flow. And just like we have to open every channel for anything to flow, we need to do this with money. If we hold on and we say, this is mine, this is only and always mine, and I'll do with it as I please, we are, in essence, saying to God, I'm going to close myself off to you. I cannot trust you in this way. There is not an open invitation. And it's not as selective as we think. We cannot be as selective as we think. When we begin to say, no, not here, not in this way, I'm going to protect me and mine, we just close off that divine flow. We have felt it in so many ways. When we open our hearts and love in a devotional way, we're spiritualizing our love. And we feel that when we offer our thoughts back to God, we're opening to the flow of inspiration. When we open with the flow of money, we are turning all abundance into gold. That's why Swamiji told that story so often of the beggar who saw the rich man coming and who thought, oh, he'll have a lot to give me. But as soon as that rich, regal man stepped out of his cart, he looked at the beggar and said, what do you have to give me? The beggar was taken so aback. You remember the story. He found the smallest grain of rice, and he gave it to the rich man. Later that night, when he emptied his bag to see what he had, he found that that one tiny little grain had been turned to gold. And it came to him. He knew in that moment, if I had just offered everything, then everything I own, everything materially, devotionally, from inspirations, would have been turned to divine gold. It was never ours to begin with. We all, at some point, if we're dedicated to growing spiritually, to realizing the divine, then we should sit in moments of meditation when we're feeling very close to God and talk to God about all of the ways that we give back energetically. And in those moments, ask yourself, how much can I give now with joy? How much can I offer back in this form? But do it when you're in the presence of the divine so that the answer is inspired. And when you say to yourself, okay, as a form of tithing, I can give right now 1% of everything that comes to me, or 5%, or 0.5%, then start doing it, and do it regularly. Definitely don't stop when you feel some fear. Don't stop if things get really hard materially. In fact, very much like the time we're going through right now, when we raise our energy to give when times are hard, that's when the greatest spiritual lessons come. That's when God can enter and take charge of our lives. Those are the moments that we will feel God's presence. I'll share just a piece of a story. We used to collect stories, miraculous stories about people and what they learned when they moved through their fear and made that very hard decision, of course it is, to give back to God even in this way, and to be asking God what's the most. But there was a story that a woman told us many years ago, but it's in one of our tithing newsletters that used to be published very often. We should start doing that again. They were so inspiring. This woman said that she just dug herself into a hole financially because of her fear and because she knew of old habits of feeling not worthy. So she started collecting stuff, and she quit tithing. And as she quit tithing, she noticed other things that were going wrong in her life. She quit meditating as much. She actually started feeling more self-involved. One day, I'm shortening her story, which is beautiful. If I can find it again, I'll find a way of publishing it for all of you. She said she was cleaning out her home at one point, and she found a sweater that was beyond her means when she bought it, as were many things in her life right now, because she was trying to comfort herself with material possessions. She pulled this sweater out that she had bought many months ago, and it still had the price tag on it. She had never worn it. And as she looked at that price tag, she realized that that sweater cost as much as 2 months' tithes would have been. She said much greater than 1 month. That's how she put it. And she just started crying. She had never worn the sweater, meaning she had never received the comfort from the other material possessions that she had gathered to herself when she quit tithing. So she immediately, though she had no money, she was in debt, she immediately started tithing. Remember, tithing is a percent of what's coming in. That's what it is. If you're making $1,000 and you're tithing 1%, then you're giving $10. $10, 1%, yes, of 1,000. If you're making $10, you're giving, I'm sorry, I'm having trouble with this sudden math. Let me not try and do it, because I don't want to run out of time before I make this point. But you see, you're only giving 10%. Would have been easier, but I was trying to make it safe for anybody. So you're giving a percent of what you have. You don't question it. That's God's. That's reminding you God is the source of all of your abundance. You're not giving it because He needs it. We're giving it because we need to give it. And she said, as she started back into tithing, she balanced her checkbook, and it balanced for the first time in a very long time. And not only that, she very quickly found 3 deposits that she had failed to register. That's a beautiful story because it tells it all. We can't find comfort in material possessions. It all belongs to God to begin with. As we give it back, we open those channels for divine blessing to come more and more and more. He works with us individually and what we need. It's not always in the form of material wealth, but we who are seeking God will feel it and know it in the form of His love, His blessing, His grace coming into our lives in just the way we need it, because God knows. But we have to open those channels and say, I remember, God, everything comes from you, and I am going to let energy flow in every way and I can. Let us all sit before and with God soon and ask Him, what should I be tithing? What and how can I give the first percent, whatever it is? How much should that be? And how do I offer that back to you to remember your ever-present blessing in my life? God bless you all.